Welcome to Hellish. I'm Daniel Whelan and I am Hell's receptionist. You join us in the waiting room on the very edge of the first circle of the Inferno. Damned souls gather while they wait to find out how they will be spending the rest of eternity. While they are here, I take the opportunity to extract their infernal playlists, the 5 songs that will soundtrack their torment. Helping with all the stuff I can't be bothered doing is Satan's T-Boy, prominent Wikipedia virtuoso and hoarder of song facts, Mr. Alex Gale. Hello, Alex.
Hey, Dan.
How have you been, Alex?
I've been well, but as you know, I've with the global situation as it is, I've decided to not read the news, and I've cut down on social media. So I've been going quite deep into Instagram. This last week because I've gone through all the things that I want to see.
Yeah.
And I'm getting the meme things now. So I found one that I thought it disturbed me a bit. It was things that I wish at 43, things I know at 43 that I wish I knew at 23.
Okay.
And it's got stuff like don't drink coffee in the morning and don't look at your phone before bed. But there's one here. Number 3, mouth breathing disrupts sleep, ruins oral health and can cause sleep apnea. Mouth taping at night helped me solve this. And now I'm obsessed with the thought of mouth taping.
And are you going to do this?
I may try mouth taping, but I've got to find some mouth tape first, obviously.
Oh, right, okay.
And I don't know if you can just use duct tape.
Or maybe you just have to find someone's mouth to tape. Is that not the hellish way?
Yes.
Is it? There you go. Look, bit of a hell thing at the end there. Okay, so it is about time you brought us a new soul to torture. So who have you conjured up this week?
Well, this is the English writer Clare Pollard. Clare is the author of 5 collections of poetry, with her first, The Heavy Petting Zoo, coming out when she was just 19. In 2022, Clare published her first novel, Delphi, and has since followed it with a fascinating book about children's literature, Fierce Bad Rabbits. This year, she's published 2 novels, one for children, one for adults, The Untameables and The Modern Fairies. Okay,
Clare Pollard, welcome to Hell.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. So what have you done to deserve being in hell?
I've probably eaten of the fruit of knowledge, Daniel.
Ah, that old chestnut.
Yes.
Ah, I see.
I'm always biting that apple.
Oh dear. Well, we'll try to punish you suitably for that. So, I was in the supermarket the other day, Clare, and I saw a magazine that was dedicated to the work of Taylor Swift, and it said on the cover something along the lines of a record of her incredible year. And when I saw it, I thought, you know who else has had an incredible year this year? Clare Pollard. Because you had 2 novels out and you've been elected to the Royal Society of Literature as well. So what is it like being the Taylor Swift of literature?
I've never been called that before. Interestingly, I was called, when my book came out when I was 19, the Britney Spears of poetry.
Oh. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure.
Well,
I hope our paths have diverged a little.
How do you go about having a book published at the age of 19? That's not very normal, is it? For did you just have a teacher who was really well connected, or? No,
I was really lucky. It was a strange story, but I didn't realise how lucky I was at the time. I just had this copy. My mum had been given this copy of the Artists and Writers Yearbook because she used to write the village plays. And there was just a list of poetry magazines in it. And I started sending out my poems to poetry magazines, got a couple published. And my editor at Blood Axe actually wrote to me and said, did I have a collection? And I didn't, so I sort of like dashed one off in about 2 weeks and sent it to him, and it got published.
Wow.
So, not how poetry books happen, folks.
The trick is to be really good at writing poems.
Yeah.
Evidently.
Oh, okay.
But, what can I say? Child prodigy.
Well, it's very impressive. So I first came across your work, Clare, and I suspect many other people might have found you in the same way, on Frank Skinner's poetry podcast, where he talked about your poems Zena and Whitby. It's a lovely podcast for people who haven't heard it. He kind of sits down and goes through 1 or 2 poems from a given poet. Whenever I hear him, though, talking about a living poet, I always wonder how they feel about it. So first, have you heard his episode about you?
I have, but I mean, he didn't ask permission or
No.
anything, which is fine. I mean, I give him all the permission. Yeah, it just somebody said, Frank Skinner's done this podcast about you. And yeah, I did listen to it. It was amazing, actually. I thought he read my poems really, really well. Usually I don't like people other than me reading my poems. I get the rhythm wrong and stuff. But
Okay.
he did a really good job.
Do you, because I wonder, like, did you listen to it and go, that's not what I meant at all, he's got it all wrong? Or like, how do you approach when people interpret your work, I guess is my question.
Oh, yeah, I love that. I think that's what a good poet wants. I think the sign of a good poem is that it's rich, it's dense. There's lots of interpretations. It's got depth to it. Like, people can still look at a Keats poem now and come up with a new interpretation. And I think that's what makes it great. If it's like X equals Y, there's one meaning to it, then it's not a very good poem.
No. But do you feel at all defensive about like what your intentions was? Or does your intention change as the poem gets older? Do you think, oh no, that's not what it was about?
Yeah, I think if there's something you really want to communicate and they haven't got it, that can be upsetting, but I'm too good a writer. I mean, people, if I want someone to cry, I'm going to make them cry. It's not like...
Do you know what? That is one of the cool things I've liked about you since you were coming here and I started reading interviews and listening to you on podcasts and things. Like, I love how unashamed you are about how good you are. That you're like, I've heard you say many times that, I've got a good ear, I'm very good on the level of the line. And I think, well, one, yes, she is. And also that you're just happy to say it. I think it's so rare that most people kind of have a bashfulness about them. Where do you think this confidence comes from?
I've worked very hard. I've done my how many ever 1,000 hours it is, I guess.
Okay.
I've just been obsessed with literature since I started writing novels when I was about 4.
Right.
So I feel I've done my time.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay, and now, of course, we have novels that adult Clare has written that we can all share in. Most recently, these 2 books, The Modern Fairies and The Untamables. So they are they're very different. The Untamables is it's a book about King Arthur and his knights told from the perspective of one of the boys who looks after the dogs in Camelot, and King Arthur's knights aren't necessarily very nice.
No,
which is
like the Bullingdon Club thing.
Right, yes.
That's all right.
Yeah. So it's kind of subverting that idea we have of King Arthur. And then The Modern Fairies is about literary types in France in the time of Louis XIV telling each other fairy stories. So although they're very different books, and certainly one is kind of much more kind of funny, and the other one is a little bit more sexy.
I mean, let's not cross the street.
Yeah.
Like, The Untamables is for children.
Yes.
Modern Fairies is for grown-ups. Do not get them confused.
I suppose it's possible to get them confused with the titles, but they both kind of are playing with myth and kind of something that's very primal in storytelling. And I guess the poems in Changeling, which is your collection that has the poems that Frank Skinner was talking about in, also kind of plays with myth. So I was just wondering, is this something that you've always been interested in, or has this kind of crept into your life?
Yeah, it definitely is something I've always been interested in. Although I think perhaps when I was younger, I was a bit more wary of it. I remember reading about Philip Larkin criticising those who raid the myth kitty and that kind of thing.
All right.
I used to feel like it was more important to write about now, perhaps. But yeah, there's definitely a pattern over the last sort of decade of my work that I can't help myself. I just love myth, fairy tale, folk tale. I keep going back to these stories and finding new things in them, and it gives me pleasure, And I think that it's definitely a thread. My other novel, Delphi, as well, is about Greek myth, and I wrote a new version of Ovid's book, The Heroides or Heroines, which is dramatic monologues from the perspective of all the women from Greek and Roman myth. So I just keep going back to the myth kitty. Fuck off, Larkin. I'm allowed to do that.
Well, it's working. It's certainly working. It's they're all very entertaining books, and I urge people to read them. So before we get to your song choices, Tracy from HR likes us to find out about your work history. just so she can match you with the most hellish task she possibly can. So to that end, she wants to know what the worst job you have ever done is.
Well, I'm incredibly privileged because I got published at a young age that I've never had a full-time crap job.
Hey.
I've always just sort of worked part-time whilst being a part-time writer, I guess. But probably the worst part-time job I had was in my early 20s. I worked in a chain pub opposite Liverpool Street Station. And well, first of all, it was back when people were allowed to smoke in pubs. And I would just go home stinking every night. But also, you can imagine the types there. It was all sort of...
For those that don't know, that is the City of London banker central.
Yeah, but it wasn't the kind of pub like the really flash bastards went to. It was kind of the lower end of the city types, and they would sort of go in there after work for a couple of hours, pretending to their wives they were still in meetings, and drowning their sorrows, and very patronising, unpleasant men.
Pubs near train stations, there's always something dodgy in the pub near the train station.
Yeah, they're quite depressing. Pubs in train stations are the worst.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but it was that sort of vibe,
Yeah, they're always kind of a little bit... anything can happen. It's like no one is there permanently, apart from people who work there. So
I mean, most of the staff were living in a squat round the corner because, it's minimum wage, etc. So.
And it's Liverpool Street Station, yeah. Okay, and then the next thing we'd like to know is what is the worst thing about the job you do now?
It makes me a sort of, because I work from home most of the time, I'm a sort of sitting duck for all the children's stuff.
Okay.
So like whenever one of them's ill, or it's like a PTA meeting or a concert in the afternoon or something, it's always me.
Okay. I think that might be the worst thing about being a parent, maybe, no?
The parent who works at home.
Yeah, I can see that. That. Okay, well, let's get on to your Infernal playlist then. So we're going to start off with a song you used to like, or that you own, that you are now embarrassed by. So what is this?
I'm going for Champagne Supernova by Oasis.
Slowly walking down the hall, faster than a cannonball. Where were you while we were getting high? Someday you will find me caught beneath the landslide in a champagne supernova in the sky. Someday.
Okay, Alex, what can you tell us about Champagne Supernova?
Well, this was written by Noel Gallagher, and it's the last song on the band's second album. What's the Story, in brackets, Morning Glory. It was released as the sixth single from the album in May of 1996 in the US, Australia and New Zealand, but wasn't released as a single in the United Kingdom. And the last single was Don't Look Back in Anger for you Brits, Dan. Paul Weller, a.k.a. the Mod Father of The Jam, plays guitar, sings backing vocals on this track, and it clearly meant a lot to Noel Gallagher, the song, because in 1997 he bought a house on Steeles Road in Belsize Park in London, which he named Supernova Heights. In 1999, he sold it to the Hollyoaks actress and socialite Davinia Taylor, and it was subsequently owned for 13 years during the noughties and teens by comedian, children's author, and famed knobhead David Walliams.
Oh, that's so disappointing.
Ooh.
That's quite a lineage that house has had, isn't it?
It fell off a cliff in 99 and... then went down into the Mariana Trench.
Okay, so Claire, tell us about the time that you liked this. Let's start with that.
Well, I was a teenager in at the right time in the north, in Bolton. I was an indie kid. So obviously I loved Oasis's first album and thought Liam was gorgeous, I liked Richard Ashcroft. I like that sort of northern swagger. And my first ever gig actually was an Oasis gig.
Oh, where was that?
I'm trying to remember. It was a big stadium. It was a big venue in Manchester.
Oh, okay.
But I can't remember what the venue was called.
Did they call it G-Mex or G-Mex or something? I saw Metallica in Manchester one time.
Yeah.
I remember being in the mosh pit and and feeling very faint. I was always fainting as a teenager. I was anemic. And my best mate, Nick, who I'd gone with, had to drag me out and sort of revive.
That's quite cool, being dragged out of a gig fainting.
I've got a vivid memory. But so I loved Oasis' first album. It meant a lot to all of us. We used to go to, you could go to clubs then when you were 16, 17. But I don't think you can now. But we used to go to this really dingy, sticky indie club called like Sparrows. And that had sort of gender-neutral toilets before it was a thing, and all the boys wore nail polish. And we used to they always put Supersonic on, and we would all get a round of these really cheap gin and tonics that I remember sort of glowing in the sort of, you know, like ethereal, ghostly neon blue in the light. So, you know, I had fond memories of the first album, but I think the second album, I sort of tried to like it. I bought it and I tried to like it.
Okay.
At the time, I would have danced along to Champagne Supernova and stuff at the time. But looking back, I think it's when they started to go downhill, didn't they? They turned into coke-fueled knobheads. And I can't bear them now.
This was the end of what made them good. I think was after this album they never recovered. But why have you picked Champagne Supernova in particular?
It's that I mean, just. It's the champagne thing, isn't it? It's the first album they were working class, you know.
Yeah.
I feel like, and that made the Swagger quite vulnerable in a way because it was just all pose, but you know they might end up just going back to being nobodies in Manchester. Yeah. And you know it's the dregs of the album, like you say, 6th single in the US only. It's like it's the dregs of the big hits of this album, I think. And there's something about the lyrics as well, isn't there? There's like I mean, well, the lyric, you can't start going into Noel Gallagher's lyrics. They're just absolutely shit, aren't they? Well, but, you know, caught beneath a landslide in a champagne supernova in the sky is just the crappiest mixed metaphor.
I can't believe I'm about to do this, but I'm going to have a go at defending it, Claire. Because I always think this song, you're right, it's a mixed metaphor. It's not great. But when people slag off the lyrics of this song, I often feel like they're willfully avoiding the idea of it being at all poetical, right? That I kind of feel like I don't mean
that's a bold gambit there, Dan. Talking to one of Britain's I'm not talking current living poets.
I'm not talking about it in terms of it being poetry, right? And you know, and I am definitely not going to tell you what poetry is because
this is mansplaining.
I'm a pleb idiot and you are a great poet. But whenever people talk about slowly walking down a hall faster than a cannonball and they kind of snigger at it as if that's like just stupid, and I'm like, but he's doing that on purpose, right? He's like, it's an oxymoron. He's purposefully...
Oh, is the cannonball fired from a cannon?
No, it's not an actual cannonball. It's like someone is slowly walking down a hall.
On purpose, but that doesn't mean... I'm not mean anything, does it?
Well, it means something to me. It means that, like, I've been in situations where I couldn't wait to get out of there.
John Lennon, isn't it?
I'm not going to win. I don't think I can win. But my thing is that I've walked slowly away from somewhere and also fast. Does that make sense? That like I couldn't wait to get out of there, but I had to walk at a normal speed.
I just imagined that the cannonball was rolling very slowly.
So you're imagining it's sort of
like someone's just like
he's leaning into Keats's idea of negative.
Push the cannonball. Off you go. And you're slowly walking, yet still faster than the slowly moving cannonball.
Right. So you thought there was an actual cannonball?
No, this. Like, last week we had a discussion, Dan.
We've already thought about it more than Noel Gallagher.
This is like you demanding money for nothing by Dire Straits, but who's that? Who's he taking the mickey? It's not. It's just it. It just is what it is.
I don't think it should ever be just what it is, though. I think enough. Like it should be more. There should be a purpose. Anyway, yes, okay, it is rubbish, but I think it's rubbish for a different reason than most people think it's rubbish. I think at least he's trying to express something about one day I will be famous.
That's not good enough, is it?
Well, yeah, I know, really.
300 quid a ticket.
Yeah. Well, have you heard about the 6-hour ambient version of this song that Noel Gallagher
what
has
happened?
made. So the National Gallery are doing an exhibition, and Noel's portrait is going to be in the National Gallery. And this exhibition, I forget the photographer's
Zoe
surname.
Lowe. She's
Zoe
a
Lowe.
photographer.
So it's all these pictures of like Sienna Miller and people like that. And this exhibition of all these portraits is soundtracked by a 6-hour ambient version of Champagne Supernova. So that's something you could do if you really hated yourself one day in London.
Thanks.
You could go and look at the pictures of famous people and
You can really easily tell that people who were teenagers in the 90s are now in charge of everything, can't you?
Yeah.
It's just they're just setting the agenda everywhere.
Yeah. Which is, but that like one, and someday you will find them caught beneath a landslide, and then it'll be the turn of the next generation, and it'll just be pop punk everywhere, and My Chemical Romance will make a comeback, and that's just the way it is. It'll just one day it will be whoever's 4 now will be in charge of everything, and it'll just be Peppa Pig everywhere or whatever it is. I don't know.
Yeah,
I haven't got children. I don't know what kids like.
Well done, Dan.
Thank you.
Wow.
Okay, so track 2 on your Infernal playlist is a song that is universally adored, You Cannot Stand. So what is this one, please?
It's the Archers theme tune.
Oh, I think this is going to be so controversial. Here we go. Okay, so Alex, what can you tell us about the Archers theme tune?
Well, I figured I should set the scene first. For those that don't know, The Archers is a radio soap opera that's been broadcast continuously on BBC Radio since 1951, and it is famously described as an everyday story of country folk. The theme tune of The Archers is called Barwick Green, and it's a maypole dance from the suite My Native Heath, written in 1924 by the Yorkshire composer Arthur Wood. The theme tune was first recorded in 1954 and then re-recorded in stereo in 1992 by the BBC, and the slightly different sound mixing and more leisurely tempo reportedly led some listeners to consider the new version inferior, some saying specifically that it lacked brio. The Sunday omnibus broadcast of The Archers starts with a more rustic accordion-arranged rendition by English folk band The Yetis.
Oh, okay. Well, that is something I didn't know. So this is like this is a piece of music that is ingrained into British national consciousness, I'd say, Claire. So that takes care of the universally adored bit of it. Tell us about why you can't stand it.
Well, partly because it signals I'm about to listen to some radio drama. Partly. I can't bear radio plays. Just the fake. Like, nobody can act on radio.
I think it's the biggest test, because that's the thing. When you hear an actor on radio who doesn't sound like they're reading it off a page, because they all get the scripts very late, it's not like they're in rehearsal. But when you get an actor that can do that, I think that's the mark of shit, they're good, because so many aren't.
Yeah, so many are terrible. And there's often so much sort of exposition and like I still can't tell who's who.
The weird thing about The Archers is there's lots of not lots, but a number of the actors are not even actors in The Archers. Like, there's an academic plays.
I don't know anything about I literally switch off when I hear that.
One is a journalist. Another one was a GP for ages.
What? Why?
I don't know.
Why don't they get actors to do it?
I don't know. Maybe actors are too difficult to work with.
Okay.
But also, it's the one. It's like it's so middle class and complacent, isn't it? And I think people who wouldn't dream of watching other soap operas, who would be snobby about Coronation Street, which I was brought up on or something, but they all. Princess Margaret's been in there.
Yes.
Archers.
She has. The Duke of Westminster's been in it. Judi Dench, Dame Edna.
Wow.
A lot of cameos.
It's so twee and just all these awful upper middle class people
I've got to warn you, Claire. My mum is feeling very, very sick now.
It is. It's a show that.
But also the music itself is also incredibly twee, right?
Yes.
I mean, it just makes me clench my jaw just to hear it.
It's kind of like
it just makes me angry.
It's like an imagined. It's like an imagined England that never existed. It's kind of like the sound, because one thing I will say for listeners is that if you listen to My Native Heath for Barwick Green, it's not just the bit that we know from the Archers. Like, it's a much longer piece of music, and it's kind of this kind of pastoral kind of country kind of piece of music, country as in countryside rather than country and western. But I just it just sounds like just an imagined Englishness to me. Just like it never really existed, and it harks back to a time that never actually happened. That the people.
Yeah, I mean, I usually like sort of folk music, but it's up there with like Terry Wogan doing the floral dance.
Yeah. It's not proper folk music. It's just and I don't know. I can imagine like a production of Robin Hood being soundtracked to this kind of music, and not a particularly good one, not like in a very exciting one. The other thing I'd say about radio drama is that I sometimes feel like if EastEnders or something like that is on in the other room, and so you're not watching it, but you can hear it, I can always hear that there's something about having the picture with it that makes it acceptable, where if you take the picture away, it just sounds wooden and rubbish. Like there's something as well. The picture kind of takes away from the fact that it's kind of, because those actors are proper rushed. They have I had a friend who was on it briefly.
The Archers?
No, EastEnders.
Oh, EastEnders.
And he told me about how sometimes they would run out of time, and so they would have to record things for the do, not knowing what the script was going to do. So they just go like, okay, give us one where you look sad, give us one where you look pleased, and they just have to like scowl, and they'd go like, right, brilliant, great, we'll move on, because then they've secured the shot. So like it's not, it's done quickly, and I imagine The Archers is done fairly quickly as well.
It's often responsive to the news and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is. I'm quite impressed because I mean, there's a lot of Archers, like it's like a cinematic universe, and I'm quite impressed that they've come up with all this stuff, and it's been going on for 70 years. So they've got this whole invented world with the various farms, and it started. Do you know why it started?
No.
It started to encourage the countryside folk to farm like efficiently under ration times. So you had the Archers, and the Archer family was trying to farm in like a sustainable way, making the most of what he could do. And then there was another family who were like losing loads of money and not making any good food. And then there was a businessman who was deliberately losing money because that was like a tax con thing he could do in those days. So it's got an interesting story, and then they've invented this whole world.
But you're saying it's essentially state propaganda.
It started out that way, yeah.
Still is,
I guess. Yeah, soft
Queen
power.
Camilla and
Billy Connolly thought it should be the national anthem. This theme tune.
Well, the national anthem is terrible.
It is better than the actual national anthem.
Yeah. I mean, if those are the two choices, God Save the Queen, the King, and the Archers theme tune, I'm definitely going with the Archers theme tune. No? Would you rather have God Save the Queen?
It's a horrible choice. I guess I am in hell, but
It is a horrible, horrible choice. And we've made you make it. So there we go, the Archers theme tune. So part 1 is now done. But before we can start part 2, we are contractually obliged to play at least one advert. So while you listeners listen to that, we're going to ask Claire about the artist she will meet in hell. If you'd like to eavesdrop on that conversation, then you can head to patreon.com/hellishpod. And for an insultingly low price, you can become a subscriber. If you hurry, you can probably get it sorted before the adverts end. On your marks, get set, go. Hello everyone. Sorry to interrupt the episode. Well, I'm not sorry really. I just wanted to let you know about a few ways you can keep us on the road to hell. The first is nice and cheap. Like, subscribe, follow, award us 5 stars, write a review, tell all your friends and enemies. We're at HellishPod on social media, apart from Instagram, where we are hellish_pod. The more visible the podcast is, the more episodes we'll be able to make. The second is if you want to tip us, you can go to coffee.com/hellishpod to throw us a few coins, either just because you're nice or because you want to try bribing your way out of hell. That's coffee.com/hellishpod, ko-fi.com/hellishpod. We workshopped that name ourselves in hell just to make it very awkward for all podcasters who are asking for tips. The last one is to subscribe to our Patreon. You'll get longer, ad-free episodes. You'll get access to our 2 pilots. Plus, there's a bunch of other bonus stuff for higher tiers, including the chance to make a cameo appearance on a future episode. That's at patreon.com/hellishpod. Now, back to Hellish. Welcome back to Hellish, where we are almost halfway through poet Clare Pollard's musical ordeal. We have come to one of the most bruising trials, a track that reminds her of a hard time in her life. So what's this then, Clare?
This is Cotton Eye Joe by Redneck.
Do you know what? It's taken 29 episodes, but here we go. When we started this, I thought it would be wall-to-wall Cotton Eye Joe, like every week. So it's nice to finally welcome the Rednecks to Hellish. Alex, what can you tell us about this?
Cotton Eye Joe, which can be known with a D at the end of "I'd" as well, is a traditional American country folk song which has been popular at various times throughout North America, although today it's most commonly associated with the southern bit of the USA. The origins of this song are unclear, although it predates the 1861 to 1865 American Civil War. Today, the song is mostly identified with the 1994 Rednecks version, the origins of which are much better known. Rednecks are a Swedish Euro dance group from Kiruna, Sweden's northernmost city, and they cosplay as rednecks from America's deep south. The band had a lot of success in the mid-90s, and this was their biggest single. It held the number 1 position for 15 weeks in Norway, 13 weeks in Switzerland, 10 weeks in Germany, 8 weeks in Sweden, 7 weeks in Austria, and 3 weeks on the UK singles chart.
Okay, so Claire, tell us about this hard time in your life that this recalls.
So this is my early teens, I guess. As I've said, sort of my older teens, when I got into sixth form, I started to make some friends and go out to clubs and get into indie music, and that was all nice. But before that, sort of the first 5 years of high school, I was very unhappy. It was quite a rough state school. I was bullied quite a lot. Often didn't have many friends. Stood on my own by the radiator at lunchtime reading a book. Hadn't been kissed, all that sort of stuff. And I basically became a sort of obsessive Beatles fan. And made myself even more deeply unpopular by wearing like a peach leather cap and John Lennon sunglasses and flares. I just sort of retreated into this fantasy world. But I hated sort of contemporary music. In fact, I wrote a song on my acoustic guitar called Sergeant Pepper Returns. There was all this on how bad contemporary music was, It's got progression and it's going nowhere. And all this
I wish we'd have known this about before we had you on. We would have called up the music demons and got a copy of that.
I think this was the sort of music I hated. And I can just remember being, on holiday in a bar in Iron Napa or that sort of thing, or at the school disco, and just I'd be standing at the side and everyone would be dancing to this and I'd be like, why am I alive now?
And so when did
I born?
And so when did you know you were a poet, Claire?
And the really annoying thing about this song is now my kids like it.
Oh no!
Because it's been on TikTok, hasn't it?
Has it?
Where they sing like do.
Okay.
They have a different, and there's like TikTok videos of like chicken nuggets singing and things. It's awful. Makes me feel a failure as a mother.
I mean, that sounds a grim period to live through, but it turned out all right, and quite quickly afterwards. You know, so what was it like going? How did you find people sort of who were like you, who could be friends that you could grow up?
I think it was just sort of going to sixth form really, because all the people who bullied me left school at 16.
You must have been, being a Beatles fan at that point, you must have been just slightly ahead of the curve, because
I know, exactly.
Then,
so
like, everyone likes the Beatles.
I saw Liam Gallagher. I was quite excited.
Yeah. I remember, like, the Beatles anthology came out, and like, everyone was into the Beatles.
Exactly. I've always been a bit ahead of my time.
I do
appreciate it at my school.
I do want to quickly talk a little bit about rednecks themselves,
right?
Who you may not know much about.
No, I don't.
But
what a surprise!
Their very names.
The period of their career from the year 2000 to 2018 would make a fantastic television sort of, HBO drama.
Oh,
in around 2000, they still had a number one hit in Germany. So this was 6 years after Cotton Eye Joe and Pop in a Poke.
Pop in an Oak.
That was the one, the follow-up hit.
Yeah.
But the guys who created Rednecks, they saw digital downloads coming, and Napster was the big thing at the time. And they thought, listen, there's no future in this for us just making records. So we've got to come up with something else. So they said to the band, we want you to be more of like a sort of a cabaret act, like a show. And the band members took against this. They said, we will not become a circus act. And we're all fired. And I thought, well, the ship's already sailed 6 years ago, guys. But never... Anyway, so they were all fired.
I love that Rednecks have principles of all bands.
But so then they recast the Rednecks. There was only one Swede in the new Rednecks from 2001 to 2004. There were two Dutch, an English lady, and a Swede. But then, in 2005, there was a coup by the former members of Rednecks who... were given like a license or something to act under the name of Rednecks until the year 2009, when all the members were again fired and replaced by the members of a Rednecks tribute band. And so by 2018, there are now currently, well, this was a few years back, 17 people in Rednecks, and they're more like a roster. And so there's a Rednecks that tour Australia and New Zealand. There's Rednecks in various parts of Europe, and they just pick them out when they need them. Can you be in the Rednecks for this summer's tour? Yeah.
But what do they do? What do they play?
They play characters.
Good question.
I can list their names here.
No, I mean, like, what songs do they play?
That's not the fun
Cotton Eye
stuff.
Joe, I mean.
Yeah,
They do Pop in a Note, Cotton Eye Joe, and the Spirit of the Hawk, which was number one in Germany in the year 2000. They have good names. There's Ace Ratclaw, Spades,
oh wow,
Purvis the Peligator, Mo Lester the Limp, Bone Duster Croc, or various other ones. Billy Ray, BB Stiff, Bobby Sue. And then the list of past members.
They sound like an absolute shower of pricks, don't they?
They do.
They're just making a living.
I work in Conwy in North Wales, and every year they used to have a little music festival on the quay there in Conwy, and because Conwy's such a small town, whoever they booked would be so loud that wherever you were in town you could hear the whole set. You didn't actually have to go, you could just hear the whole thing. And one year they had this is the level that they get headlining. They had Doctor and the Medics, who they had a hit with Spirit in the Sky, and they opened with Spirit in the Sky. A third of the way through their set, they played a cover version of David Bowie's Jean Genie that went into Spirit in the Sky, and then they encored with Spirit in the Sky twice. They played it 4 times over the course of their gig. I suspect that the Rednecks probably do the same thing. It's probably like, you ready for one more go on Cotton Eye Joe? And then they do it again and again and again. Okay, so So being as we're on this subject of hard times and sad songs and things like that, Claire, you have a poem that I was reading earlier, which is called Why I Can't Listen to Sad Pop Songs Anymore. And being as that's kind of our business is forcing people to listen to sad pop songs, I wondered if you would mind reading your poem for us.
Yeah, no
Lovely.
problem.
Thank you. Okay, here we go.
Why I Can't Listen to Sad Pop Songs Anymore. Rain pours down like catharsis. She listens to Shawn Mendes. Bedroom door shut, floral litter of Ken's lip balms and post-its, striking tragic little poses in the mirror as she mouths, or emotes, the kids now say, fingers making feathered hearts, whilst he sings of needing kisses where it hurts, of needing stitches whilst I'm hanging up the laundry in the spare room on the dryer. Every day it needs redoing, hanging black sails of a dark wash, and I feel like going under. In the Odyssey, the crew watch the rain speckle the deck, but the sirens' power ballads about wanting something back are muted by the wax, whilst, lashed to the mast, only Odysseus can hear them cheep the song Self-Pity that goes, shooby-doo, poor me, heartbreak, ache, make me good. La la la, I will not listen, I can't have again or more. Such music's an enchantment sung to stop me getting home when I am here.
That's just a great poem. I love that first line. It's just beautiful. So it's been a couple of years since we last had a poetry collection out of you. I know that poem is rather recent. Is there another poetry collection in the offing at some point?
Yeah, it's coming out next year. It's called Notes of the Female Poets.
Oh, awesome! Is that one of them? Well,
yeah,
I guess
that's going to be in the book.
That's in. Hey, okay. So you got an exclusive there, listeners. Well, lovely. We'll look forward to that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to track 4, which is a track you hate by an artist you love. So, what is this, please?
I'm not quite sure what to call it. It's either Candle in the Wind 1997 or Goodbye England's Rose.
And it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when the rain set in, and your footsteps will always fall here along England's greenest hills. Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will.
Okay. I mean, come on. What can you do but laugh? Alex, give us some song facts about Candle in the Wind 1997, please.
According to the Guinness Book of Records, Candle in the Wind 1997 is the second highest selling physical single of all time. It's the highest selling single since charts began in the 1950s. And that's like proper American ones as well, not just parochial British ones. As listeners will probably know, it is a rewritten and re-recorded version of Elton John and Bernie Taupin's 1973 song, Candle in the Wind, that was written shortly after the death of Princess Diana on the 31st of August 1997. Elton John wrote this version after being contacted by the publicity-shy millionaire Richard Branson on behalf of the Spencer family. It's been performed live only one time at Diana's funeral in Westminster Abbey on the 6th of September 1997, and the single was recorded immediately after the funeral, with production by George Martin, released a week later and sold 1.5 million copies in the first week alone.
Jesus. Okay, so Claire, let's start with your love of Elton John. Let's start on a positive note. So tell us about your love of Elton John.
He's great, isn't he? He's just like a dude. He's total life force. His ear for melody is just unsurpassed. I've always loved him. All my family love him.
How do you feel about the lyrics? Because obviously,
I always thought Bernie Taupin had like the easiest job, and I mean,
got lucky, eh?
He got really lucky, didn't he? 'Cause he's a sort of average poet.
Right.
I mean, he's not bad.
And
I mean, the lyrics are quite interesting. They're not always just a love song. You know, I'd give him that. He often writes about quite interesting subjects. But you know, they're not the best, and he gets a hell of a lot of credit. Really, he's the only lyric writer that you ever hear getting talked about like that. Really.
Yeah. Who are your favourite lyricists? Who are lyricists you rate?
Well, Leonard Cohen, obviously,
Yeah.
is a proper poet.
Yeah. Is that a?
I mean, like if you look at something like Susanna, it's actually got meter. You know, it works as a poem as well as it's like he set his poems to music. You know?
Yeah. It is a difficult thing because sometimes like a brilliant lyric just doesn't. It just sounds so hollow when you read it out. It just sounds really hollow.
Yeah, I mean, I love more contemporary. I love Jarvis Cocker, for example, but I wouldn't buy his book of lyrics, which came out with Favour.
No,
Dan's probably got it on the shelf behind him.
I haven't got the Jarvis Cocker one.
But I mean, he's a great lyricist. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a very different skill. So let's get on then to Candle in the Wind 97 / Goodbye England's Rose.
Well, I don't know. Is it Bernie who's responsible?
It is.
Isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
They did it together, or I presume Bernie did that part of it.
So I can't blame Elton too much because
No.
really it's the destruction of the lyrics that I find really offensive. I mean, I find it's offensive anyway to take this beautiful tribute to someone and then basically it's like it's like taking someone's gravestone, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like chipping up the name, quickly chipping a new one on it. You know, I find the whole idea offensive.
I remember when Princess Diana died and the original started to get played, and I thought, well, that makes sense because it's a song about a woman who died when the press hounding her to death and all that kind of stuff. I understand why people wanted to hear that after she died. It's then making it. You know what I really hate about this is it just makes the original worse. It makes you just kind of. It takes the sheen off it.
It's weird. It's not, because Elton John was a good friend of Princess Diana, and his I can on a human level. His really good friend had died and he wanted to do something. So he did. He also is pretty pally with the Queen. And there was a lot of sort of, you have to be really careful not to say something like you were shit on by the royal family. So he's got and at the same time, also it's nice because this woman who is like the sister and daughter of people and the mother to people has died in a really horrible way. It's just really sort of mawkishly put in front of us. If it was a private thing, it would be quite nice. Yeah, even though the lyrics are not great.
But yeah, the fact it's kept Candle in the Wind, which suggests someone who's like very vulnerable and exposed and has no one around helping her. I mean, it's condemning those in power in the original.
Yeah.
And sort of in this, but then it's sort of fudged, isn't it? Because the next line should be no one to cling to when the rain sets in, which makes total sense. It's a great lyric, and instead it's this never fading with the sunset. Well,
it's not going to do that, is it?
It doesn't matter with a candle, does it?
Candle in the Wind, never fading in the sunset.
There's so Alex, you were just talking about this being kind of like the act of somebody who's grieving. So what people sometimes forget about this is that it's a double A side.
Yes.
With something.
Yeah, I've forgotten that actually.
Yeah, something about the way you look tonight, which was on his current album.
Oh, yeah.
Which means that is also a #1 single on that album. So I always thought it was really cynical to release
is quite cynical, isn't it?
This double A side.
Also, I don't like the bit about a one walking footsteps always going through England's green hills, like it's Jerusalem.
Yeah, comparing it to Christ.
What?
It's pretty. What is it? Yeah, your
I've
footsteps
got
are always gone.
Today I took the lyrics and put them side by side in Word, which is not as easy as you would expect.
But they're quite close, aren't they? Like he keeps lots of words like grace and whispers. And stuff.
Yeah. There's plenty of stuff. They took out the bit about from the young man in the 22nd row who sees you as something more than sexual. He took out.
Okay.
And
I wonder why.
Yeah. Put stuff in about soul and wings of compassion.
Yeah, it just the other thing for me is that I was 16 when this happened, about to turn 17, and I remember all the kind of minute silences and people putting flowers everywhere and people just crying in the street and all that kind of stuff, and it's actually I would say it's probably quite an important moment for me because it was the moment when I kind of went, oh, I don't like this. I don't like this kind of forced grief. I don't like. It's the beginning of me kind of not liking the monarchy as an idea and kind of starting to question it. So in a way, it was quite important for me, but it came from a place of absolute hatred.
I don't know whether I don't know whether it was forced. That's the weird thing about it. I don't think anyone forced people to be in grief. I think it was just a really weird thing that happened.
I remember being in like places where there were minute silences and people were taking it very seriously, and like you're expected to be quiet along with all of this stuff, whereas like this doesn't mean anything to me. And it's sad that someone died, but people die every day. God, that sounds so heartless, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the trouble was, like, it was really the tabloids that killed her, and yet they were lapping it up, weren't they?
It was a horrible.
There's something gross about that, I think.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Because it was all more news, wasn't it? It was all more.
Oh, I bet it did loads for selling papers.
I mean, the Daily Express still has Princess Diana on the cover most days.
Yes, as many times. In fact, it might well be, Claire, that it's like poet in Diana hate shock or something like that. Now you might be in trouble.
My first time I was ever on TV.
Oh yeah.
When I was a teenager, I was only about 13. I did this thing called Teenage Rage.
Oh.
And it was a 3-minute rant on like Granada TV or something like that.
Okay.
And I did it against the monarchy.
Hey.
I remember saying, "Who cares if Diana gets her hair wet at a Pavarotti concert?"
Well, you were never going to like this then, were you? Brilliant. Okay, so that is track 4. We're going to move on now to track 5. We're going to head off to the earworm farm. And so to placate the little blighters, we need a track, one stuck in your head you can never get out. So what's this?
It's Let Me Entertain You by Robbie Williams.
Okay, here we go.
I'm a burning effigy of everything I used to be. You're my rock of empathy, my dear. So come on, let me entertain you. Let me entertain you.
Okay, Alex, what have you got for us on Let Me Entertain You?
Well, Let Me Entertain You was released in March 1998, barely 6 months after Princess Diana died, and he had the cheek to be this happy. It was the 5th and final single from Robbie Williams' debut album, Life Through a Lens. It was written by Williams and Guy Chambers, who is a former member of the band World Party and a long-time collaborator and musical director for Robbie Williams. The song got to number 3 on the UK singles chart and was certified platinum with sales of over 650,000 copies.
Okay, so what are your feelings about Let Me Entertain You by Robbie Williams, Claire? How does this get stuck in your head?
I mean, first of all, it just literally does. It made me tell you in advance what I was going to say, and then it's just been in my head all week. Oh.
Good, that's our plan.
I mean, it's incredibly catchy, and to be fair, that is their magic, I suppose, of the Guy Chambers and Robbie Williams partnership. But I think this is the most annoying of the songs of that era. It's sort of the most desperate and gurning, isn't it? And also, it's just the people who like this sort of music. It's the soundtrack to 1,000 yellow coats sort of sliding on their knees onto the stage, isn't it? The beginning of darts tournaments, things like that.
It sounds like it should be in a musical. It's like you can picture a guy running around a West End stage, sort of at a turning point in his life. He's the big bombastic fella in the show. Yeah, and I used to like it. I had it in my I had this album in my car on tape and used to listen to it. Despite, I really don't think I like Robbie Williams. I mean, I don't like him particularly. I like him now. I think he seems quite interesting. But at the time,
why do you need to buy on tape when it's always playing in Asda?
Yeah, well, that's true. I could have just.
And on all the radio
stations. The nearest Asda was probably in Warrington or something in those days. It hadn't taken over. But
we used to play this in our band, Alex.
Yeah, we did. Remember our
very
I don't know how I managed that. It's quite
goodness.
complicated on the drums. I don't know how I managed that.
Oh, I think I just played root notes.
Yeah, I probably failed to play.
Yeah, I don't think we were any good.
No, that's true.
We definitely weren't very good. Claire, have you heard about the new film that is coming out about Robbie Williams' life?
No, I saw that documentary he made. It was really weird, where he's like sitting on his bed the whole time.
Well, this is even weirder. Yeah. So they've made a biopic of Robbie Williams' life. It's called Better Man. It comes out on Boxing Day, and in it, Robbie Williams plays himself, or at least he voices himself. No. He voices himself because in it, Robbie Williams is a CGI chimpanzee.
Okay.
All the way through, it's a CGI chimpanzee.
Funny, but I'm sort of not surprised when you say that.
It's what
I don't expect from him.
I mean, it's the only thing I'm interested. I would not have seen a Robbie Williams biopic otherwise. But the thought of that's a solid gold idea.
Is that coming out of the cinema, Dan, or is it
in the cinema? Yeah.
Wow.
It's the cinema.
Yeah.
Sort of cinema.
Yeah.
Maybe they're probably trying to rush it out in time for the Oscars, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is directed by the guy who directed The Greatest Showman, Alex. So you never know. You never know. But I think that's just a good idea. That dark howl is coming from the HR department. Tracy must have your work placement, Claire. So while I fight my way through the Cenobites, Alex, can you confirm Claire's infernal playlist for me, please?
I can indeed. Track number 1, a track Claire is embarrassed that she used to like, is Champagne Supernova by Oasis. Track number 2, a track that's universally adored that Claire cannot stand, is the Archers theme. Track that brings back bad memories is number 3, and that's Cotton Eye Joe by Rednecks. A track that Claire hates by an artist she loves is Candle in the Wind 97 by Sir Elton John. And a track once stuck in Claire's head she can never get out is Let Me Entertain You by Robbie Williams. So, Claire, which of the 5 songs would you least like to hear on repeat? So which is the most hellish of your hellish songs?
It's predictable, but it's got to be Cotton Eye Joe, hasn't it? Come on.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll be playing you out with Cotton Eye Joe, and then that will follow you on high rotation wherever you go from here on in. So Tracy says you are going to be working in a pub near hell's busiest train station, which is Pandemonium Street. You will be occasionally allowed out just to go and do things like watch school plays and go to parents' evenings, but that will be the only time you are allowed to do that. You're not going to be allowed anywhere near a pen. You're just going to be doing that. Your hellish task is going to be soundtracked by your infernal playlist, and that will follow you around in hell in the guise of a slightly menacing singing balloon. So before we unleash the singing balloon, is there anything you want to tell the listeners about? Maybe remind us about the 2 books you released this year.
Not to be confused with each other. The Untamables, which is for children, and The Modern Fairies, which is a bawdy romp, very much for the grown-up in your life.
Bawdy romp. That sounds fantastic.
See, Alex is interested now.
No, I'm sold.
We should have started with bawdy romp.
Start with the bawdy romp.
Okay, well, Clare Pollard, thank you so much for coming. Good night, and now, go to hell. Hellish was written and presented by me, Daniel Whelan, and the future writer of Pop Music in an Oak, The Redneck Story, Alex Gale. You can support the show on patreon.com/hellishpod. Find us on social media at hellishpod, apart from Instagram, where it's hellish_pod. You can listen to all of Claire's choices and our ongoing Ultimate Infernal playlist, bringing everyone's choices together at hellishpod on Spotify. And until next time, damn you. Damn you all to hell now.